All right, so welcome to another episode of the Quadruple D. I have a lot of different topics on the back burner here, and I decided to record another Quadruple D episode. This is a show within a show on the Critical Weight Theory podcast, and basically I look at different characters in politics and I tear them apart in a non literal way. And I have to admit, I do have mixed feelings about the Onion's satirical takeover of Alex Jones's Infowars. Now, it's a little bit complicated, but I think I kind of spell it out if you just look at the basics of what is going on. In order to properly discuss this topic, you need to have an analysis of state bankruptcy mechanisms, corporate media control, and the commodification of online outrage, and what it reveals about the realities of capitalism, the legal system, and public deception, and all kinds of different stuff. So it's not so straightforward for me to actually celebrate this thing because it's actually way more complicated than that. I mean, sure you can enjoy what Tim Heidecker will do with the Onion, but if you want to like seriously grapple with what is going on, it's a bit of a taxing thing, you know. You got to look at a lot of different stuff like the corporate media and state enforcement and all that kind of stuff. And it also doesn't feel like a complete organic victory. You know, it's not like this is happening in a purely organic matter or manner, I should say. I said matter. It's not. It's just happening through the court system. You know, it's a legally imposed outcome. So you know, it's a little bit iffy. Those kinds of things are always iffy for me. So at its height, the corporate media entity called Infowars amassed over 10 million monthly viewers and generated more than $50 million in annual revenue. So that's quite a successful media business, I believe. And this empire was dismantled not by a shifting public consciousness, but by the coercive apparatus of state courts. So again, that kind of makes me have mixed feelings about it. This was following defamation lawsuits in Texas and Connecticut, and judges hit founder Alex Jones with $1.4 billion in judgments. All right, so like a lot of people, you might think that he totally deserved that, and you know I'm all right with that perception, but you know it's a mixed bag because again, this is not a totally organic thing. It's a court imposed outcome. So while the legal system uses massive financial penalties to enforce order here, the state rarely succeeds in forcing wealthy individuals to pay restitution. So consequently, the victims' families have not received any of the court ordered funds. And I know that that's supposed to happen through the income that is generated by this, but correct me if I'm wrong, but to this day, Jones has managed to shield his assets through a bunch of legal maneuvering, leaving him technically bankrupt, but still broadcasting, from what I understand. And as Chris Matei, an attorney representing 9 of the Sandyhook families, observed, all he's been left with is an iPhone and a fancy microphone. But I think he's still able to, you know, generate wealth. Um, I don't think we're done seeing him yet, and I think this could easily feed the persecution complex on the right. And in the next episodes that I'm going to be doing in the quadruple D for next week, I'm going to get into where Alex Jones gets some of uh, his political leanings from, you know, the conspiracy theory kind of stuff, and we're going to get into why some of that paranoia or whatever you want to call it on the surface, you know, it seems like it's justified sometimes, right? We do have, you know, a bunch of oligarchs calling the shots in our political system, yet Alex Jones is actually sort of, well, not just sort of, but significantly in cahoots with those same very types of interests. So what's going on with that? I'm going to get into that next week a little bit more, and it really is a strange thing if you look at right wing populism, because it does have a way of bouncing back, and I think Alex Jones himself might reemerge. It's like the more you talk about him, the more you conjure him back up, sort of like Candyman, I guess. And the Onion satirical takeover again, it seems like a victory, but it's not a complete victory or anything like that. So rather than waiting for the state to finalize the asset transfer, the satirical media outlet The Onion is using this capitalist marketplace to intercept Jones's infrastructure. So more than a year after its initial bid to purchase Infowars at a bankruptcy auction, The Onion launched a direct parody of the conspiracy platform under its own domain. So I think right now they still don't even have the domain, so it's like not even a true takeover of the site. If you go to Infowars, it actually says off air, and like that's the only thing that it says on their site. So it's a little bit strange. So they're sort of like doing a parody thing. So I don't even know how to explain it. It's Infowars, but not exactly, or something like that. I don't know. But the strategy relies on subverting Infowars' original model of weaponized outrage and questionable product marketing. Led by creative director Tim Heidecker, and I'm often a fan of Tim's. I like a lot of his stuff, even some of the more out there kind of stuff. But the parody is supposed to replicate the aggressive formatting of Jones's broadcasts, including mock wellness supplements and hyper sensationalized reporting, to turn the platform's methods against it. So the Onion CEO, Ben Collins, explained the motivation behind the long delayed project. He said, "Don't give comedy writers a grudge for 18 months." So, yeah, if you look at Infowars revenue peak, it was like $50 million annually, and the total state judgment was $1,400,000,000, I believe. And so the initial Onion payout that is supposed to be going to the families, I think, is $100,000 or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of these details. I'm not sure if the money's even gotten to the families yet or any of that kind of stuff. So Jones built some of his fortune by falsely claiming a lot of different things. In this case, saying that the 2012 Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, which killed 20 children and 6 adults, was a government staged hoax. So this rhetoric mobilized his audience to launch real world harassment, surveillance, and death threats against grieving families, demonstrating how centralized media platforms can weaponize vulnerable populations to generate attention and revenue. And in response, the Parody Project attempts to redirect capital back to those harmed by the platform. And the Onion is distributing an initial $100,000 to the victims' families, or at least it's supposed to be doing that, funded by sales of merchandise that blends the classic InfoWars aesthetic with a rainbow colored The Onion logo. And while this distribution acts as a form of mutual aid, it still operates entirely within the boundaries of commodity exchange and corporate ownership. So, it's not entirely an organic thing, like I explained. And if it was like a true anti authoritarian resolution, I think it would more thoroughly dismantle this centralized corporate information system that allows individuals to profit from targeted harassment rather than simply transferring the ownership of the branding through this weird state supervised auction. So, again, you might see this as a moderate win, but it could backfire. And I think it probably will. I think this will further mobilize right wingers out there, because they have that persecution complex, and I think we're going to have to do more to change things organically rather than just rely on the courts. And I'm not entirely sure how to do that, but just thinking we can rely on these court imposed outcomes, I think that could be a little bit unrealistic at this point. You have to do more to change the culture, and that's quite a different thing. And no matter how else I feel about this, I do think it's also could inspire people to have these conversations about what kind of media environments we could create that are non-corporate in nature. Wouldn't it be nice if you could have streaming platforms and even entertainment? Like, I'm not talking about like serious political content, but just entertainment in general that doesn't depend entirely on billionaires and corporate profits to exist and thrive. I think people should have these types of conversations more. I think I think it is possible to move a little bit further in that sort of direction. And of course, it's a long and winding road to get there probably, but maybe not so long and winding as we would initially think, provided that people just imagine that these things are possible. You could have different social media platforms, you could have all kinds of different stuff when it comes to the media environment. But if people aren't willing to create these things, then guess what? We're going to stay in trouble, and we're going to still sometimes be victimized by right wing media hellscapes. So the antidote to that is to create something different. Like Jello Biafra famously said, the former lead singer of the Dead Kennedys, he once said, "Don't hate the media, become the media." And I'll be damned if that isn't one of the best things he's ever said, because there's definitely some truth to that. And I think we could benefit from tapping into that truth.